Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, thank you for tuning in. We've got a great and admittedly painful show today. So content warning, we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy stuff regarding Gaza. We have an amazing guest today, Dr. John Kahler. He's a pediatrician, retired pediatrician, who is the co-founder of MedGlobal, an international medical NGO that provides on-the-ground medical support in disaster areas and war zones. They've been in Gaza since 17 or 18, 2019 maybe, and he's been back and forth multiple times during this horrific siege on Gaza. And he'll be going back in a few days. So I wanted to bring him on and talk about what's happening there and what we can do. Before we bring him on, I want to do two things. One, I want to play a clip. I spoke a couple of days ago at my local Naperville City Council Municipal Center on the need for ceasefire. And there's been this constant comment that what does a locality have to do with an international crisis? Why would a city council care? What role does it actually play? And I think this is a fundamentally dumb idea that you can't speak because you're not an international government. Governments are made of localities. That's how they work. That's how our democracy exists. And, we recognize the phrase, all politics are local for a reason, because we need to listen to the folks on the ground. If you're saying that localities don't matter, and that only national people matter, then what you're saying is that at the end of the day, the fat cats in Washington shouldn't care what you think when they're making their decisions. And we all despise that. We can't stand out-of-touch politicians. We loathe out-of-touch politicians who refuse to listen to what we have to say and instead are only paying attention to what billion-dollar corporations have to say. So part of turning that tide, part of making sure that we reject this notion of saying that locality shouldn't be involved is to be involved. And I make this argument. It's a quick clip, only about 3 minutes long. I'm going to go ahead and play it. And I want you to listen and pay attention to the 3 points I really make here. This is not just a common sense thing to do, but we have a practical, a democratic, and a historical obligation to ensure that as localities, we are engaged and we are involved. Let's go ahead and play that clip, Alexa.
Good evening, Naperville City Council. Good evening, Mayor. My name is Qasim Rashid. I'm a human rights lawyer who lives here in Naperville with my wife Aisha and our 3 children. I've worked on this Israel-Palestine issue for about 50 years, and I'm here once more to respectfully call upon this esteemed City Council to recognize the power you have and sponsor and pass a resolution for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and an unconditional release of all hostages. And I want to take my few minutes to address specifically this claim that because we are a municipality, we cannot engage in international affairs. This view is wrong practically, democratically, and historically. First, it's wrong practically. For the first time in history, the majority of people on Earth live in cities, and 4 out of 5 Americans live in cities. They are the building blocks of our state and federal, and indeed even our international relationships. It's why Naperville has led by example with an international sister city program for well over 30 years with Nitra, Slovakia, Cancun, Mexico, and Pátzcuaro, Mexico. The goal of which, and I'm quoting from the website, Naperville City website, an open dialogue to learn, work, and solve problems together. This is one such opportunity. Second, for Naperville to stay silent is wrong democratically, as every single poll conducted on this issue shows that Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike are united in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire and unconditional release of all hostages. At a divided time in our country, this is an area of unity that we should exemplify. And third, Naperville staying silent is wrong historically. For example, when President Reagan and the Congress under him refused to engage actively to end apartheid in South Africa, more than 90 cities acted courageously to divest from apartheid South Africa. And we're not even asking for a divestment. We're just asking for a resolution. And in doing so, it earned the support of Archbishop Desmond Tutu and, of course, the late, great Nelson Mandela. And it led to the 1986 passage of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, a bill that had become so popular by then that it even overcame a presidential veto from President Reagan. City leaders and mayors overcame a presidential veto. That is the power that we have today. And earlier there was a proclamation for Earth Day that we celebrated today. That began when a senator in Wisconsin, Senator Nelson, was inspired by local activism on environmentalism and started Earth Day. More than 33,000 civilians have been killed. At least 13,000 are children. So I close with the words of the late great James Baldwin, that the children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. And I'm beginning to suspect that whosoever is incapable of recognizing this may be incapable of morality. Let us embrace our morality and pass a permanent ceasefire and unconditional release of all hostages. Thank you.
All right. So you see the point I'm making here, right? That this is something at the end of the day that will only be successful if we make a mass movement on the local level. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, that this comes down to looking at the history. Folks listening, remember apartheid South Africa. Imagine if the locality said, you know what, it doesn't really matter, we don't really care, we're not going to be involved. It looks asinine now. Look at any other example in history. Look at the Rwandan genocide. Look at the Holocaust. Would it make sense to say that just because we're not the federal government, we're going to stay silent on this? Of course, it would not make sense. It would seem cruel and backwards, and the same reality exists today. We absolutely need to play a critical role in this space, and if we don't, we're doing ourselves a major injustice. And again, there's a horrific report just published by ProPublica, which is one of the most respected and prestigious nonprofit media companies out there, where it just published a couple of days ago. It says, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is sitting on staff recommendations to sanction Israeli military linked to killings and rapes. That is the reality that we're facing right now. The article goes on to say, a special State Department panel told Secretary of State Antony Blinken that the U.S. should restrict arms sales to Israeli military units that have been credibly accused of human rights abuses. He has not taken any action. The special State Department panel recommended months ago, way back in December, that Antony Blinken disqualify multiple Israeli military and police units from receiving U.S. aid after reviewing allegations that they committed serious human rights abuses. But Blinken has failed to act on the proposal in the face of growing international criticism of the Israeli military's conduct in Gaza, according to current and former State Department officials. The incidents under review mostly took place in the West Bank and occurred before Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. So think about this. We're not even talking about Gaza anymore. We're not even talking about post-October 7th. These took place in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas, before the Hamas attack. And they include reports of extrajudicial killings by the Israeli border police, an incident in which a battalion gagged, handcuffed, and left an elderly Palestinian-American man for dead, and an allegation that interrogators tortured and raped a teenager who had been merely accused of throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails. These recommendations went to Blinken in December, and they've been sitting in his briefcase since then. That's a quote from another official. A State Department spokesperson told ProPublica that the agency takes its commitment to uphold human rights seriously, and this process is one that demands careful and full review. And the department undergoes a fact-specific investigation, applying the same standards and procedures regardless of the country in question. Obviously, that isn't being applied here. And this is the key point here. Right? The recommendations came from a special committee of State Department officials known as the Israel Leahy Vetting Forum. The panel, made up of Middle East and human rights experts, is named former Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, the chief author of the 1997 laws that require the U.S. to cut off assistance to any foreign military or law enforcement unit, from battalions of soldiers to police stations, that are credibly accused of flagrant human rights violations. That's what's happening here. And we're going to go to break in just a minute, but I want to point out that the U.S. government cut off funding to UNRWA on the mere allegation that about a dozen of them, of this tens of thousands of people large organization, that about a dozen might have maybe been involved with Hamas. Now, notwithstanding that there was zero evidence of that whatsoever, notwithstanding that the Israeli government who made the accusation has not provided a shred of evidence of that, the US government cut off UNRWA funding, cut off the basic life support of humanitarian assistance for Palestinians, and banned funding them for at least another year. But now, a special State Department panel tasked specifically with determining if human rights violations have occurred, has provided detailed evidence of rape and murder. And the US government is completely turning a blind eye. This, my friends, is massive injustice. It is a complete violation of our human rights, and it is why we need to be engaged and involved. When we come back from break, I'm going to invite on Dr. John Kahler, and I want you to hear his testimony on the ground, because remember, there are no Western journalists allowed in Gaza right now. The Israeli government has banned it completely banned them. And so his testimony on the ground is one of the core testimonies and the realities and the bearing witness of what's happening right now. So take a listen to him. And if you can, support MedGlobal, because it goes a long way to saving humanitarian life. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back from break, we'll be speaking with Dr. John Kahler. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm excited and grateful to welcome our next guest, Dr. John Kahler. Dr. Kahler is a co-founder of MedGlobal, an international medical NGO that provides on-the-ground critical relief in humanitarian areas, disaster areas, and war zones. He's already taken 2 trips to Gaza and is scheduled to go again later this week. That's why I'm so grateful we were able to secure him on our show for a few minutes. He's a retired pediatrician, a graduate of University of Illinois, just like I am. He trained here right in Cook County, right in the Chicagoland area for more than 30 years. And he's taken medical missions to Haiti, Mexico, Latin America, Syria, you name it. And this is kind of a cool fact. He was in 2016. He and Dr. Zahir Salul, who went to Aleppo, Syria, because of this deployment, he and Dr. Salul were honored as Chicagoans of the Year. They founded MedGlobal in 2017 and have had a program in Gaza since 2019. So when I say we're grateful to have someone of his esteem here, I mean it. Dr. Kahler, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, it's horrifying what we're witnessing on our television screens, on our iPhones. There's this, bizarre, it's the only way I can describe it, phenomenon where you can, within 30 seconds, watch a commercial for donuts at Dunkin' Donuts, and then watch a horrifying video of a child maimed or, a body decaying in the streets. And that's what we're witnessing. That's what we're witnessing on media. Before we get into some of the questions, I want to do a check with you. How are you managing? How are you feeling in this space? Because I can't fathom, but I want to hear from you.
I'm not actually managing very well on this one. I've been in some bad places, including Haiti and during the earthquake, Camp Moria, which was on the Greek islands, and it was for Syrian. Basically, at the time I was there, for Syrian refugees, which at that moment in my life had been the worst place I had ever been.
Sure.
So I thought I was ready for all of this, but the moment I walked into Rafah itself in the Palestine, I was overwhelmed. Life is experienced by the senses, right? So
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed by both visual, audio, tactile, smell, taste. It was all there, and it was the worst thing I had ever experienced, but without a question, without a question.
I spent a few weeks in Turkey last year after the earthquake. I was there a few days after the earthquake hit. It's part of
Yeah.
a nonprofit called Humanity First. We were providing medical and tactical relief. I'm not a doctor, but we built a food
Yeah.
kitchen. And in one of the cities, you could smell the rotting
Yeah.
flesh because the buildings had collapsed so aggressively and quickly. And I think the difference here, and I don't like comparing scars, so I won't. But I think one of the distinctions we see in Gaza, in Rafah in general, is that this is not a natural disaster. This is not something that was unpreventable. This is completely a policy decision. These are
Yeah.
choices made. Does that add to the weight of what you're seeing?
Well, it does actually, but the other thing, I think if you were in Ankara or one of the places that was hit badly, you see the level of destruction. This is the level of destruction that Gaza City is happening.
Yeah,
I mean, this is level, but the difference is, and it literally is 180 degrees different. When you were there, everybody was there to help. People were being helped.
that's right.
In this situation, people are just holding on. And even groups like mine, excuse me, and other international NGOs that are there to help, we're under an umbrella of people who we're under an umbrella of an environment that is counter to that.
Yeah,
So our presence is a counterbalance to the zeitgeist of the region. In
that's right.
Turkey and in a natural disaster, it's the overwhelming zeitgeist is of help, care and help. This is exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah,
And
no,
yes, it
very
does.
well.
That's exactly what touches it.
Very well articulated. We were in Ankara, in Turkey, and Osmania, and a few other places near the Syrian border. And despite the atrocity, you saw people working together. You saw this
Yep.
fervor
Yep.
to send money and send support, we saw people from all over the world coming through. And here it seems like the exact opposite. There's blockades after blockades.
Well, it's you're 100% correct, and it isn't even just blockade. People were in Turkey. We were
Yeah,
there also.
that's right.
People were finding places for people to live and
Yes,
building lives from that very rubble. There
right.
is an overarching lack of comfort in Gaza. You
Mhm.
just let alone do you not know what the day after, which those of us who are internationalists talk all about how the day after is going to be. Well, I don't know what tomorrow is going to be, let
Right.
alone what the day, the quote unquote big day after is going to be. And that's a huge difference. That's an absolutely huge difference.
When we spoke last, I'm going to ask you about this in a second because your answer was horrifying, and I think people need to understand this. And if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. John Kahler, who is one of the co-founders of MedGlobal. He's been to several trips to Gaza already and will be heading back in a couple of days. So we're grateful to have a few minutes of his time. You mentioned that the typical day in Gaza is one of constant threat. And in part because of these drones and the constant buzzing of the drones throughout the day and throughout the night. Can you talk a bit more about that and paint that visual? Because I
Of
couldn't sleep
course,
after
of
hearing that.
course. There's two things that your listeners should be aware of. One is the absolute scale of congestion. And I'll just give you a figure that I probably used the other night that has just always amazed me. Between October of 2023 and March of 2024, the population density went from about 5,000 to about 56,000 per square kilometer. For those of you who are in the region, Naperville itself is twice as big as Rafah,
Mm,
and there's now 1.4 million people hunkered down in Rafah. So first of all, it's just the scale of congestion. Second thing, though, is that it's refugees or internally displaced people, or any displaced people, always when they're in camps have two things they do. They wait, and then they move to wait again. That is your day to get X, Y, and Z. And in most situations, take the thing back to Turkey again. people were trying to set up to help X, Y, and Z. Well, in Rafah, X is housing, Y is sanitation, Z is nutrition. None of those are available. Every one was removed immediately. So
Right.
that's what that blockade does. And so let alone are people under the constant threat because they have nowhere to go, by the way.
That's
That's
right.
the other thing. Even
Yeah,
with
they're
Syria
locked
and
in.
that, you could go over the mountains to Turkey. I mean, not that it was easy, but there was escape valve. There is
Sure.
no escape valve here.
Not here.
These folks are jammed up against the walls of Egypt. Egypt says they don't want to let anybody in. So now you got a 1.4 million people who've been displaced from the north, who are now being told this is the last 5 kilometers between Rafah and between the Khan Yunis and Rafah. This is the last 5 to 7 kilometers. They sit and wait daily for what's going to happen. And on
You,
top of all of that, drones are circling 24 hours a day. It sounds like you've got a lawnmower going above your head 24 hours a day. So
and it's those drones that are
uh,
firing missiles, those drones that are
some
targeting.
are those drones are usually just there to scare people, and the observatory
Yeah.
monitoring. Yeah, the drones that are there to kill people are silent. You don't know
You,
when that's going to happen.
you, which makes it all the more horrifying because you don't know at any given second could be your very last one, and the mental
Make
trauma
make
is
Yep.
insurmountable. You
Yep.
mentioned the data point I wanted to expand upon, that 1.4 million people are in an area half the size of Naperville.
Yep.
Naperville is where I live. There's about 150,000 people in Naperville,
Yeah.
and it can get pretty congested here. The idea that you increase the density tenfold and cut the size by half, you're talking about a 20-fold increase in population density. For those of you
Yeah.
who are familiar with Naperville, you know how egregious that is. Any mid-sized city, think about that. You increase the density 20-fold, you remove the hospital, you remove food access, you remove sanitation, and that is a perpetual day in the life. And Dr. Kahler, your career is as a pediatrician, and so you've seen the worst of the worst inflicted upon innocent children. And you made a comment. Again, you made several comments that stuck with me, but this one I'm thinking about right now, where you said we can both condemn the attacks on Israeli civilians on October 7th and recognize that 100% of the 14,000 children killed since were completely innocent of that. And
There's no. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think you get where I'm going from is
Yeah.
dealing with the trauma and the psychological impact on these children. How do you address this? How do you address the psychological and emotional needs of these young survivors of what the ICJ calls effectively a genocide?
Yeah. Address as in how do we as a profession address it? How do we as a community address it?
I
So
mean,
there's two
on the
things. How
ground,
do we, or
like
as a
ground
person
right
do?
now. Yeah.
So I have, this is why when you asked me earlier how I'm doing, and my answer was I'm not doing well. And you notice what I immediately did. I immediately flipped it over into a discussion of,
Sure.
of
Yeah.
things, right? And that's a protective mechanism because in point of fact, I'm not doing well. And I've got 6 children. I have 12 grandchildren, and I can't even when I'm in a situation like that, I can't even begin. It haunts me to think that what happened there probably could never happen here to that scale, but it certainly can happen here, and no one should kid themselves to think
Yeah.
that it can't. And so, as an individual, I can only do what I can do, which is I can administer, I can care for whatever I can care. I saw the first 150 children I saw when I was there. Most of them were under two. Most of those were under one. 100% of those, 100%. That's a selection bias. I accept that. 100% of those were sick, and they were sick with simple illnesses. There was a big outbreak of what's called bronchiolitis, which is a lower respiratory disease with wheezing in little kids that we can treat real easy. But what really stood out to me was even something as simple as all of them had diarrhea. all of them had diaper rashes because they, first of all, and I was going to sit down and do my discussion that I've done blindly for 30 some years. And I realized every single solitary thing I was about to tell this mother to do, she couldn't because of the context in which she existed. This was cold. We were there in January, so it was cold. Kids had 3 or 4 different layers of things. The tents had no heat. Tents had no clean water, so you couldn't clean the children. Tents had no extra Pampers or nappies or anything like that, so you couldn't change the children. We had no significant amount of medication that we could give them to help the diaper rashes. Everything that you and your wife would do for your kids in without thinking couldn't be done. Absolutely couldn't be done. So it was just uh, heart wrenching to try to deal with that. And kids were, I mean, the parents were there. They would come back when you wanted them to come back. Everybody says, "Well, you can't do this because there's so many you see." And I said, "No, there's nothing I can give them. I can give them me." And
Yeah.
so I would have them come back in 2 or 3 days just for me to recheck the child, and literally to a person, they were there to come back. So I can, at the minimum, I can give them me.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's what I do.
And look, and as a parent, you're a parent, I'm a parent. There's nothing, even when there's nothing to do, there is some satisfaction in knowing that a physician is looking at your child and doing what they can to the best of their abilities. You, you know, you talk about the challenges, the resource challenges that we face. Here's a question that I don't want to ask because it's a hard question, but if you're okay answering it,
Sure.
how do you prioritize medical care when resources are so scarce?
Well, there's 2 or 3 different things, and I'll give you a somewhat nuanced answer from my own perspective, and then I'll give you the standard answer that
Please.
happens in the emergency room. The nuanced answer is that, truth be known, the care I was giving, I'm lucky. I'm an old man that trained many years ago. And so I trained before a lot of the advent of stuff that we have right now. So I know the natural history of these diseases. And so, like with
Yes.
bronchiolitis, you take your child to the emergency room right now, a 4-month-old bronchiolitis, and they'll give them a breathing treatment with some albuterol or something like that. That's
Yeah.
particularly worthless. That's doing something to be doing something. I know the natural history of it, so I was much more comfortable in prioritizing those kids. So I did send kids to the hospital, but those were the littlest kids with the worst need, and I knew who that was. So as a
Sure.
pediatrician, I don't have to make these decisions much. Now, that being said, as you can imagine, when people heard there was a pediatrician or an NGO that had opened up these primary health centers, all of them who had been getting care, say, a lot of these kids with complicated neurological illnesses, say seizures and things like that, had been getting care in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. I mean, they had received there because, as hard as it was to get there, the systems had worked together and had begun. Yeah, come October 7th, every single one of those are cut off.
Yeah.
And so they would bring kids to me and terrible kids that needed, I mean, terrible situations that needed a lot of care. Could I get them into Egypt? Could I get them out? And then that was
Yes.
what was heart wrenching, because of course I couldn't. I mean, of
Yeah.
course I couldn't. That's the nuanced answer from a seasoned pediatrician. Seasoned here means old
Yeah.
pediatrician. And from a emergency room standpoint, your criteria, actually, truth be known, although it's more heart-wrenching, is actually easier, because there are criteria that you set up when doing mass triage for a mass casualty. Now remember,
Yeah.
in the United States, a mass casualty event is 5 to 10 people. That will overwhelm a well-staffed hospital.
Sure. Yeah.
We're talking 30 to 40 people brought into an emergency room, half the size of the one you're thinking about in your mind.
Yeah.
30 to 40 people brought in with no resources. So that's a different, and that happens 3 times a day.
Yeah.
In Evergreen Park, Advocate will go on shutdown. Patients will be moved to different places. But they do have the doctors in those situations really do turn off the emotional aspects for while they're working, and they have a set of criteria they use. Most of them, they'll come back, they'll sweep back in to hurt
Yeah.
them and haunt them later. But while they're doing it, they're on pretty much autopilot. Very, very well trained and very specific autopilot, but autopilot nonetheless.
And you make this really important point about 30 to 40, 3 times a day, people coming in with massive, injuries that need treatment.
Yeah.
And as a human rights lawyer, what infuriates me, aside from the humanitarian aspect of it, is on a legal side, an occupying military has the legal international law obligation, the requirement to ensure all resources, food, water, shelter, medicine, healthcare, education, that these are provided to the people that they're occupying. For the Israeli military to conduct this bombing, this raid, this siege, in whatever justification, even if it was the most justified war in the world, it is
Right.
not. Even if it was, it still doesn't absolve them from mandating healthcare access to the people that they are occupying. And that part is just outrageous to me, beyond comprehension.
You're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. And in the destruction of UNRWA, they've essentially owned this now.
Yeah,
I mean, they own it from the standpoint of what you're talking about, but they've destroyed the only agency that has the heft to take care of this.
right.
So the only agency that now can do that is the IDF, and they should have been doing it anyway.
Exactly.
There's all, and I don't want to get into a large political discussion. That's not the purpose of
No,
this. But
yeah,
but the simple issue, what you alluded to is 100% correct. They own this crisis.
that's right.
And they're doing the first half, which is the offensive part, but they're not doing the humanitarian part, which they
Yeah.
should be, irrespective of what their lunacy
Yeah,
talks
and
about.
that's my point, that whatever you think of the siege, it doesn't absolve them of this fact. If you're just tuning in, speaking with Dr. John Kahler, co-founder of MedGlobal, career pediatrician, retired now, working in some of the most dangerous parts of the world, has been to Gaza multiple times, is heading back soon. We're down to our last 10 minutes, and I want to shift gears and talk about two things. I want to talk about hope and resilience, and I want to talk about support. We'll get to support in a second, because I want our listeners to be involved and engaged, and I want them to take actions, and we'll talk about some of those actions. But whenever there are situations of adversity, there's often stories of resilience and hope that I have to believe exist here as well. I look at your story as a story of resilience and hope. You and Dr. Salul have really done the Lord's work. Can you share, are there particular stories or individuals that come to mind that you think about that keep you inspired or encouraged to
Yeah,
keep
there actually are. Now, as a pediatrician, like I say, you might have heard me say that in our primary healthcare center, we were seeing 400 to 600 patients a day, and that's true, and that's
Yeah.
among probably 5 doctors and a bunch of other things. But the hope and resilience, there's a difference there, obviously, between hope and resilience, and the person that stands out to me the most actually was a translator that worked with me. She was a young woman. She was a dentist, had been displaced. Actually, two. One was a dentist that had been displaced from Gaza. Was with me, and I happen to know her from another group that I support, who supports these people, these young students and stuff that are graduates. But anyway, so she came to work with me as a translator. And fantastic young woman, just a hopeful, pleasant, always with a smile on her face. But I was talking to a family, and I was caught in a long discussion with this family, because the family had just come from Khan Yunis, from Nasser Hospital. They had been evacuated because the IDF had said, you all have to get out of here because we're about to attack the hospital. Now, that's probably 5 kilometers from the middle of Rafah, where we were. And they came, but the kid was sick. She had been discharged from the hospital. And I was talking to the family, and they were telling me this story about having been bombed in Gaza City and under the rubble, then having been bombed in Khan Yunis and under the rubble. And we were going back and forth. And I do a lot, or I did and practice a lot of family therapy work. I trained in family therapy after I was done with pediatrics, because of the importance of that. So I was doing a lot of work in empathic connection and things like that, and meaning it, because it had touched my heart. And we were done, And this woman, this young doctor, Islam is her name, and she's a 22-year-old dentist, and she just mentioned to me, and I mean, when I say matter of fact, I mean it's like you and I talking right now. It was a matter of fact. She said to me, I was under the rubble twice,
Wow.
and I mean, she just said it, and I looked, and because I can imagine all of my intense discussion, because it had to go through her. I mean, she was my translator. All of my intentions, I can't even imagine what it brought back up in her.
Jeez.
I can't even imagine what it brought back up in her. So I didn't spend the rest of my day thinking, my God, how can I be this dense? If we say 100% of the population is affected, that 100%, a subset of that are the workers that work with us, the translators work with us. So that's the complexity of this web and the resilience of those folks to be able, every one of them will share the last half a piece of bread they have with you. Now, and not
Right.
just share it. Let me be stronger about this. They don't just share it. They won't eat it until
That's right.
you eat yours. And I saw the
Incredible.
same thing in Aleppo. In Aleppo, it was Ramadan. And when I was there with Zahir, it was Ramadan, and I was fasting with my colleagues. I'm not Muslim, but I'm there with them, and I could do it with them. And they kept saying they want me to eat. I said, no, 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 no. Well, when I got back one afternoon, they took me somewhere, and I said, should I go? Because I don't know what's going on. Those were the ISIS days. I don't know what's going on. And my translator said, yeah, go. So we went. We went up in this old building. Went up 5 floors. I'm still not knowing what the hell's going on. They knock on the door, open the door. There's a spread 10 yards wide just for me
Wow.
that they had to put
Wow.
together. And I
That's
was
incredible.
just, I mean, I cried. It was such a remarkably good thing. It's the same way. It's the same way with with the translators and the young people that are working with us in Gaza right now in Rafah. They are the future. The IDF has managed to kill off the middle right now. I mean, so those people who were your teachers in law school were my attendings and
Yeah.
training. The universities have been blown up, so the bombing can stop tomorrow, and there's nowhere to go. The
Yeah.
universities have been blown up. When I say blown up, you've seen pictures.
They're
These are
gone. Yeah.
blowing up.
They're gone. Yep.
Teachers have been killed. Professors have been arrested.
Yep.
Attendings are in jail. So this is the future. These are the folks we have to help.
We're speaking with Dr. John Kahler, a pediatrician, a physician, co-founder of MedGlobal, and he's sharing powerful stories of what's happening in Gaza right now on the ground. Part of the frustration is that they're not allowing international journalists to come in and report. And so
Oh,
this
yeah.
testimony, on the ground testimony from Dr. Kahler is critical. The website is medglobal.org. And the first call to action I have for everyone listening is go on and donate a cup of coffee, skip coffee for one day and
Yeah.
make a $5-10 contribution. It goes a long way. I mean, I've been to disaster zones and I can tell you $5-10 goes such a long way. So please, one, do that. Two, continue to raise your voice. And we're down to our last 3 or 4 minutes here. Dr. Kahler, what can folks do besides donating? How can they help impact this movement towards a ceasefire, a release of hostages, a return to humanity and upholding of justice? What can we do here across the other side of the world to help the
Yeah.
people in Gaza right now?
There's two things. One is get involved in your local community. You and I both testified at a city council meeting in
Yes.
Naperville, along with others, of course, to no avail because they did not put they did. This wasn't for a pro-Palestinian proposal. This was for a proposal to stop the bombing and save lives.
Peace.
It
Yeah.
said nothing about it. And by the way, to return hostages, not just the hostages that are trapped in Gaza, who have to be in a terrible situation, but also those women and children detained in Israel without being charged. So yeah, release the hostages. I could not be more supportive of that. But the other thing, because there's a myth out there that municipalities can't do anything. And that's a flip of democracy on its head. The municipalities are exactly who should be doing things. This should be coming a groundswell bottom up, not
That's
not
right.
not not the feckless administration in Washington saying vanilla little things that tend to appease things. And oh, by the way, this is where we're now recording about a week after the Iranian craziness that happened. And
Right.
guess what you haven't heard now on the radio or on the TV at all now? You haven't seen Gaza.
At all.
Gaza's taken not a third step because the Trump lunacy is going on in the United States. This is only in the United States and in
Yeah.
other places. Gaza's still off the top in other places, but Trump
Yeah.
isn't there. But the other thing to prepare yourself to do, particularly those of you in Chicagoland that are listening, the Democratic National Convention is coming in July and August. And whether or not this situation is what won't be taken care of, depending on the status of the situation,
Yes.
should determine the amount of active protest that one does. So
Right.
in addition to hooking up with your local folks and working locally, be prepared to come to Chicago and for the DNC and let them know that nobody's vote can be taken for granted, irrespective of there's a specter of Trump, and God knows he's a specter to me too, because I'll be in jail with you and everybody else that protested if he's arrested. I mean, if he's elected. But the point is that the streets need to let the DNC know they have to get off of their butts and do something, and not a vanilla
No,
little
actual
thing, but
action.
something in real action. Yeah.
And to add to your point, Dr. Kahler, people forget that during apartheid South Africa, it was the
Yep.
90 plus municipalities who divested and passed resolutions that ultimately helped Congress pass an anti-apartheid bill that was so popular that even though President Reagan vetoed it, Congress overcame a presidential veto. And this was ignited by municipalities. So anyone who tells you that, what's a local city council going to do? They're lying to you. They're gaslighting
Yeah.
you, or they don't know about history, or they're just callous. There's no positive reason for it. And it's that much more important, as you said, to uphold democracy on the local level and speak. Dr.
Well, you
Kahler,
also
yeah,
let me also just add real
yeah,
quickly. There's also this. My co-founder and I have somewhat of a different opinion on this. But this Vietnam War didn't end because Congress finally got together and decided to do
right.
the right thing. Just like
Yeah.
civil rights, 1965 civil rights bill didn't pass because of that. And the reason, and you could be aware of that because they're trying to roll back all those things right now
Right.
through congressional. So that didn't happen because of simple legislative wrangling. Same way, you're 100% correct. Same way with apartheid. So in the streets, mass movements are what moves the Congress. I mean,
Beautiful.
that's what they respond to, not simple backdoor, backhanded or what do you call it, backroom discussions. That doesn't do anything except play. They have the power. So if they're stroking you, thinking that they really want to know what you have to say, God, if our government doesn't have a lot more resources than me, I don't know, but put 10,000 of me on the street,
That's right.
and then they will listen.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's being on the street, it's activating, it's organizing, it's voting, it's donating, it's being engaged and investing in our democracy. Dr. Kahler, we're so grateful for your time, so grateful for your compassion for humanity and for your leadership. Godspeed on your trip. Please stay safe. Please come back safe and sound. We'd love to hear more. I'll give you the last word before we close out this section.
I would like, first of all, let me thank you for the ability to have an honest and earnest discussion, particularly for our local folks. And I will let you know what happens when I get back. It'll be my pleasure.
We're looking forward to it. In the meantime, anything else we can do, you let us know. Dr. John Kahler, co-founder of MedGlobal. You can support them at medglobal.org. Please keep Dr. Kahler in your prayers. Continue to send your support. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. That was Dr. John Kahler, and what an angel of a man. He's come, just I'm enamored with him. He's put himself in harm's way over and over and over again. Done so without pay, done so without any ask for anything of support, and doing it because it's the right thing to do. You know, in Islamic teaching, there's a belief, there's a verse of the Quran, actually this is in the Torah as well, that to save one life is to save all humanity. And Dr. Kahler is taking that a step beyond and literally saving not just one life, but literally saving all humanity with the work that he is doing. Powerful, powerful testament to the power of human compassion. I encourage you all to go to medglobal.com, or I'm sorry, medglobal.org, and contribute what you can to this incredible cause for humanity and justice. I want to close with a somewhat of a tragic but hopeful story of better days to come. Story that is out of Australia, the tragic incident of a mass stabbing that left 6 people dead. And one of the people killed was a member of my Muslim community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, a young man who I had never met before, but his name was Faraz Tahir. He was a security guard at a mall when the stabbing happened. And when people ran away from the murderer, he ran towards him and helped slow him down. He was 30 years old. He had left Pakistan, fleeing religious persecution, spent 4 years in Sri Lanka as a refugee, and then finally was accepted. His asylum case was accepted in Australia. He had just gotten to Australia not more than a couple of years prior. And for him to now, actually, I'm reading it now, Tahir, a 30-year-old Pakistani citizen that fled religious persecution in his home country and sought refuge in Australia, first arriving in Brisbane, Australia in December of 2022 before moving to Sydney in 2023. So he'd been there less than 18 months. And one of his friends, Qadir, who is the president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community Youth Association, said that Tahir was excited that Australia had afforded him religious freedom, and his way of giving back was through a lot of volunteer work. This was shortly after the month of Ramadan ended. He was stabbed by 40-year-old Joel Cauchy. He was helping people with parking their cars, helping elderly people to make their ways. And no matter how hard things were, his friend Qadir said he was always there to take time out and give back to the community. Truly tragic, truly tragic. This is, you know, you look for heroes in humanity who are just selfless, who recognize that life is bigger than who they are. Life is bigger than their individual existence, and they leave their mark on humanity. And my love, my prayers, you know, as Muslims, we pray, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun, which is an Arabic prayer that says that to God we belong and to God must we return. And so sorry to get a bit religious on you guys, but you know, I'm deeply pained. Young guy, 30 years old, and had his whole life ahead of him. And to me, this just goes back to why the work we do has to be consequential. You never know when it's going to be your last moment. You never know when your time is going to run out. The work we have to do before us to uphold humanity and to protect humanity and to uphold human rights, that work is insurmountable. And the time that we have is minute. It's almost insignificant. It's already run out. So my ask of each of you is to take the moment, take today, take tomorrow, take the moment to reflect on what you can do to continue to elevate your work. And many of you are doing incredible work, and all of you are doing the best you can. And I deeply cherish each of you for that. Keep that hope alive, keep that work alive. And, you know, people like Tahir, Faraz Tahir, who gave his life, people like Dr. John Kahler, who continued to risk his life. You know, to me, these are the leaders who give me hope in the future of humanity. And I'm hopeful that it inspires each of you as well. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. You have my promise to continue to advance a show that builds on compassion, justice, and accountability for those in power. Got a really important show lined up for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place, at 10 a.m. on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. My friends, be fierce and lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.